Hello, everybody. This is your favorite Spider-Man 1980s comic book podcast. This is Here Comes the Spider-Cast, number 25. This is your co-host, Mike L. And as always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell. And today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man comics from June of 1982. We're going to start off with The Amazing Spider-Man number 229, then move on to Marvel Team-Up 118, and finish things off with Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man number 67.
That's right. And this first issue here, Amazing Spider-Man, it's somewhat of a classic issue.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've... Yeah, I've heard... Like, I mean, but have you heard about this before you read the issue?
I have, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Because I actually first came across this in sort of like a prestige format reprint that reprinted this two-parter, 229 and 230.
Right.
Yeah, so obviously it was considered a classic issue, you know, in the 80s or whatever. And I can see why. I think this issue was a lot of fun. What do you think?
Oh, it was great. I loved it. And I think I remember reading this as a kid.
Sure.
And this kind of like, I think is the reason why. I think earlier we talked about Madame Web when we first were introduced to her in Amazing.
Sure.
Like a couple weeks back when we were reading her first appearance.
Right.
And you said you weren't too familiar with her, but you heard that she wasn't a fan favorite and not liked a whole lot.
Right.
But I was a little shocked by that because I was like, oh, I remember like really enjoying her, her stories when I read them. And I think this might be the reason why. Sure.
And, you know, there's something, it's a weird, definitely like whoever would think to create a supervillain that's an old woman that's like basically immobile and like is blind, but
right.
You're right. There's something about it that's appealing. Like I had there's something cool about her.
And she's like also not quite a supervillain.
Right.
And
right.
not really a hero either. She's kind of like this neutral party that kind of like tries not to interfere too much, but then jumps in when things, when she sees things are going to kind of pop off and be a little crazy.
Right. And I like how she's basically, you know, like a, almost like a, you know, like mythologically, she serves the purpose of like a witch or like an oracle or something, but her powers are based on technology, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I definitely agree that Madame Web is a cool character. So anyway, getting back to this specific issue, we've got a cool cover here by, I'm assuming it's by John Romita Jr. and Al Milgrom, and we got the Juggernaut looming over Spidey, and he's holding up Madame Web, and it's a pretty cool cover. What do you think? Yeah,
it's a really cool cover. I love the silhouette of Juggernaut like looming behind them. It's fantastic. The form of all the figures too are really great, and I think the proportions are spot on. And I think that it's probably the most interesting part of the story, or the part that like really grabbed me, was this beginning dream. So to put that on the cover, I think was a really smart idea to kind of like really focus in on the climax of the story.
Yeah. And also, I gotta say that the cover is excellent, but the interior art is slightly better.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna assume it's because it's inked by Jim Mooney. Like, just look at the first page, those inks.
It's so good. I absolutely love this dream, this like vision that Madame Web has. It's so fantastic. Like the imagery and like the slight adjustments to the characters to kind of make them like bizarro dream versions of the characters is really cool too.
Right, because she has almost no mouth.
She doesn't have a mouth. Spider-Man has like toes.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah,
okay.
and then the Juggernaut has these like big devil horns, and is referred to as a devil. Right. And I freaking love it. I mean, even Spider-Man's costume, the spider like pops off of the costume.
Right.
So it kind of feels like this spider is more a part of him rather than like him just having the abilities of a spider. And I don't know, it just adds a little bit to kind of make it feel more like a dream, because everything in dreams, it feels almost real, but there's always these like pieces that are out of place to make you
don't quite fit.
Right. So I think that those like subtle adjustments were really cool. Going back to what you were saying with her mouth not being there, I think it's really cool because she doesn't need a mouth because all of these are her inner thoughts, right? This is being shown from her perspective. So everything that's happening, she's not actually saying anything out loud until she finally wakes up and she shouts please, and that's when her mouth appears. And she not only says that in her dream, but that says that in real life, which is what wakes her up.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's really, really cool.
Yeah, because it is possible to wake yourself up with your own voice.
Right.
That's kind of a strange phenomenon, but yeah.
And then, so if you look on digital page 4, original 3, the first 2 panels, they're almost the exact same image of Madam Web screaming, but the first one doesn't have a mouth, and then the second one does have a mouth. And it kind of pops from the dream to real life and her waking up. And I just think that's such a cool, subtle way to kind of add to the fact that they're trying to make this look and feel like a dream. And I love it.
Yeah, me too. I'm a big fan of this. And then, so then we touch base with our hero, Spider-Man, who's in his Peter Parker identity, and he's got a really cool shot of him chilling by this little light. He's studying, right? And he's got just a little cool shot. I love the little reading light there and the phone in the foreground. It's a really moody shot. It's unusual for John Romita. He doesn't really do stuff like this usually, but it's really cool, eh?
Yeah. I even love like the awkward pose that he's sitting in the chair.
Right.
Because I do stuff like that all the time where if I'm like getting comfy, like reading a book or a comic or even like watching TV, I'll sometimes just like, without even thinking about it, like transition into these like really weird poses, and it's weirdly comfortable. So I saw that and I thought that was really cool. Yeah. Nice little touch.
Yeah, so basically, Madam Web calls up Peter Parker and tries to warn him about this dream that she's had. She's like, listen carefully, someone will threaten my life within the next 24 hours. I don't know who or when, but I do know that you are the only one who can possibly protect me. Will you? Yes. Well, yeah, sure, but how? Not like the Denny O'Neil Spider-Man. It's like, what? Your dad's a sea captain? Sorry, I don't work on the sea. See you later.
Bye.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was pretty great. And then after that, we catch up with Black Tom Cassidy, and he's on his yacht, and the Juggernaut kind of bursts in and is getting restless because he's on this boat and he doesn't have anything to do, and he gives Juggernaut the mission of going to capture Madam Web. So he leaves. I love this like moment where he really lives up to the name, the Unstoppable Juggernaut, and like he'll just walk through walls or doors or whatever. He doesn't open anything or go around things. He just beelines wherever he needs to go. He bursts off the boat and breaks the railing, jumps straight into the water, sinks all the way to the bottom, and then walks to shore. It's just fantastic.
Freaking cool.
Yeah, I love it.
Now, here's the thing. For the people that don't know, the Juggernaut is a kind of a weird character because even though he's an X-Men character, he's technically not a mutant.
Right. Yeah, because it comes from like a gem or something like that, like a necklace.
Some kind of an enchantment, right? And plus he also has this helmet. Now, I'm not sure if the helmet is sealed and he's able to breathe underwater. I have no idea. But I'll go along for the ride.
Sure.
And like you said, it's very cool that he's just walking along the floor of the river here. So and also we have to remember that at this point, not everybody knew who the Juggernaut was, readers or other Marvel Universe characters, right? So it's not like now where it seems like over the years everyone's met everybody so many times it's no longer special, right? So it was different back then. But anyway, so we touch base with Peter Parker in the Daily Bugle, and he he runs into Betty Brant, who has recently married Ned Leeds, and both of these characters have been around, I believe, since the 60s. So it's kind of cool just because they're sort of bringing back some classic characters that haven't been around for a while. Just like recently they brought back Harry Osborn, right, and Liz Allen. So that was kind of cool. But anyway, so they touch base, chat it up. Sorry, were you going to say something?
I was actually just going to say, before we move on, I do want to point out there's a couple of panels on these pages that I absolutely love.
Sure.
So when we jump to Peter Parker back in New York, we like the first panel is this like really long, thin panel. It's like it goes from like literally the top of the page to the bottom, and it's super thin. Like it takes up maybe an eighth of the width of the page. Like it's really, really, really thin. And like to me, it felt like an establishing shot of like a camera pan down.
Right. Okay.
Like you're going from one scene to another, and then like the scene starting up at the sky and then kind of panning down to the building and then to the street view to like the door of everybody going into the building, and then it cuts to like the busy, chaotic Daily Bugle.
And I love the way that, like, what a great way to lay out the page. You put the building on the left side, so it establishes where they are, and then all these panels are action that's going on inside the building.
Yeah,
you know?
It's great.
It's so cool, yep.
And then later on, we get the same thing when this scene ends, after Spider-Man gets a call from Madam Web at the Daily Bugle. He leaves to go catch up with Juggernaut, who's she has a vision that he's going to be coming out of the water. And the same thing, there's like this one panel right in the middle of the page on digital 10, original 9. And it's like a long, like really long panel this time and thin. And it's like just the docks.
Well, and also right above that is a 3-panel sequence that's like shows the Daily Bugle sign, then a shot of Peter changing into Spider-Man, then an extreme close-up of looking through the sign and seeing him swing away.
Right. And you can see the web on the back of the Daily Bugle sign where he keeps all of his like stuff, where his costumes and everything.
Yep.
It's so
cool.
So good. The layout of this, those 3 panels are fantastic.
You're right. Yep. And then we get a great shot. So now the Juggernaut is coming. So the Juggernaut comes out of the river and he's walking through whatever park this is or whatever, knocking over trees. Again, this is what's, I love when writers, they take a character that's been around for a while and they sort of like, they go, okay, I'm going to take this guy and just push him to the extreme. I'm going to see what I can do with these powers. So he's knocking over cars, he's knocking over trucks. And Spider-Man,
he like busts a tree walking through the park.
Yeah, I love it. He knocks over a tree. Then he's walking down like a street now, like a financial district here, and Spider-Man comes up behind, and we see this is cool. Now, there's a couple times he does. John Romita does this, but he's drawing like multiple Spider-Mans in the panel as he's swinging down to hit him, and then he just bounces off. Now, this is what's interesting is I've read quite a few Juggernaut stories, and I've never been quite sure how his power works. So I think it's cool that they show that it's the narration says, inches before striking the lumbering figure, Spider-Man's amazing webbing is halted by a glowing aura of pure force.
Right. So that also kind of makes sense earlier where he was able to like jump and walk through the water. I think it's just the fact that like this gem or this power that's giving him this energy or superpower is not necessarily like making him really strong, and that's what gives him the ability to crush through things. It's that literally things bounce off of him,
right?
So nothing can touch him. So when he jumps into the water, it's not that he has like the ability to breathe underwater. It's just the fact that nothing can stop him, not even drowning.
Right.
So it's kind of it's ridiculous, but it works. Like it's kind of a cool, interesting idea.
Very cool. And before we get too far, did we explain? Okay, so yeah, we went over why Black Tom Cassidy is sending Juggernaut, right?
Oh, he's like, he wants to capture Madam Web to kind of use her precog abilities to kind of figure out what's going on in the city and.
Right. He says, with her power added to our own, no one could defeat us.
Right.
And then Juggernaut says, all right, you're running the show. If you say she's important, then I'll go get her. And that's it. He's on his way. And that's the story,
Yeah.
So anyway, so then Spider-Man has now got to try and figure out different ways to stop Juggernaut. So he figures, okay, well, I can't touch him, but what if I create a web to block his path? And then Juggernaut walks through the web, and it's cool because as Spidey readers know, Spider-Man's web is unbreakable for an hour, right? And so he's pushing through the web, but the web is attached to a building, and so the webbing starts to actually pull apart this building. It's freaking amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. And then and so now of course there's all this debris everywhere. So then Spider-Man jumps down and he's ripping up the road.
Right, there's like a pothole or something.
Right.
So he goes and starts ripping it up to make this giant hole in the ground so he'll fall through, which would stop him, which is a pretty cool idea. Like, how do you stop somebody? Well, he's going to keep walking. You might as well make something where he'll drop down.
Right.
But even that doesn't stop him. He like punches and walks his way back up, and I guess kind of like makes his own steps as he's walking and like breaking the wall and ground around him.
Right.
So he just burst right out and continues walking. And what I love too is that the Juggernaut is not there to kill or fight Spider-Man. He's there for Madam Web, so he doesn't really care that Spider-Man's doing any of this. He's just continuing on. He webs him up, he breaks through it and keeps walking. He falls down a hole and climbs his way out and continues walking. He doesn't really do anything to Spider-Man. I think that's so fun. A really great kind of mix-up, because normally, like, if a goon or a bad guy is out doing something and Spider-Man shows up, that's what the fight now turns into, right? That's their goal, is to kill Spider-Man. Everything else is kind of lost, where this, it's like he doesn't care what's going on. He's on a mission. That's what he's doing. He's unstoppable.
Right. And so now this is where it gets cool. Well, it's already been cool, but this is where it gets even cooler. Is on the next page. Okay, so this is Digital 15, original 14. Do you remember that Bugs Bunny cartoon where he's in a wrestling match with that giant wrestler?
Yeah, okay.
That's exactly what this reminds me of.
Yeah.
The way that in this there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Spider-Mans jumping all over Juggernaut, trying to figure out a way to stop him, but Juggernaut just keeps going. And it totally reminds me of that Bugs Bunny cartoon, because Spider-Man is completely ineffectual, right? Or ineffective. It's just great. I love it.
Yeah, it is.
He's like,
it's awesome.
Right, and he's like trying to twist his arm around, but like and then nothing. Oh yeah, so now this is another great sequence. He's latched onto Juggernaut's arm, and Juggernaut can't shake him off. So what does he do? He smashes through a building and then smashes out. And there's actually a great 4-panel sequence where he goes through, and then there's just a corner. Like, it's like he's basically like John Romita's basically taken the building and split up a wide shot into 4 panels.
Yeah.
And it's great. And you'll notice that the second panel is actually, the second and the third panel are not like stationary. He's made the panel look like it's shaking. You notice that?
Yeah.
It's so cool.
It's great.
So he smashes through and then comes out the other wall with no Spider-Man on him. And then he's like blasted nuisance. I love it.
Yeah. That's great.
Yep. And then we cut to inside, and like we see everything's all knocked over, like filing cabinets and books, and people are all over the place. And
right.
Madam Web touches base and tries to he gives him another clue. I have perceived a word in connection with our foe. Does Sidorak mean anything to you?
Right.
Sidorak, yeah, maybe. So then he's like, well, why doesn't it? Maybe we should call the Avengers or the Fantastic Four and see if they can help. But then, of course, Madam Web's like, she tries to contact them, but discovers neither can be reached. And of course, Marvel back then was so continuity conscious. They actually have at the bottom CFF 241 and Avengers 219 to see why, right? It's just so cool. I
will say, though, I think that this little like side this little like tangent that they go on with going to the
Doctor Strange?
Yeah, to go see Doctor Strange in this Wong thing is a little weird and feels out of place again.
Well, it's kind of one of those things where ideally you wouldn't have any of this. You wouldn't have references to Doctor Strange or the Avengers or FF, but because in the Marvel Universe all the superheroes live in New York City, right? It's kind of like you really have to suspend your disbelief to think that Spider-Man wouldn't ask for help.
Yeah.
But I guess I know what you mean. Like, it does kind of take away from the main plot.
Yeah, I'm hoping maybe it will come into play later, because the Crimson Bands of Sidorak are these like, it's like this red rope, like the silk rope that's used to constrain constrain people that Doctor Strange has. It's like this ancient item, and it's said to be like unbreakable, and you can't get out of it. So I'm hoping maybe that'll actually come into play into the second part.
Yeah.
Or like
maybe
it's something that they're building up to, because this isn't the first Wong cameo that's been an amazing, right?
Right, you're right.
Since Roger Stern has started writing. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, he's definitely been in before. I don't remember exactly where. I'm not sure if it was in a Roger Stern issue or not. I don't remember, to be honest.
Right.
But anyway, so back to this. So then Spidey continues to follow Juggernaut. Now we've got like the police and like a SWAT team creating barricades, but Juggernaut is just smashing through everything. So anyway, so he's approaching the barricade. They shoot him. The bullets are completely ineffective. He knocks them all over. And now he's actually in the building. Smashes through the door. He sees that Spider-Man has covered up the staircase with webbing. He rips it all down, walks up, and Spider-Man's in the room with Madam Web. And now he's got a really clever idea. He's hooked up, it's like an electrical panel.
Right.
Yeah, like an actual transformer. So he's hooking it up to this web so that when Juggernaut comes through, he's going to electrocute him, which he does. And of course, it's completely ineffective.
Right.
So then Juggernaut smashes through, and then Madam Web's freaking out because basically her dream has come true, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then Juggernaut grabs her, and then Spider-Man's like, "You big dumb jerk, she's going into convulsions. That chair you yanked her out of was a life support system. If you move her, she dies." Juggernaut dies. Then I came all this way for nothing. Throws her down. She's of no use to me this way. That's it.
And
just
then
walks out.
Leaves. It's so it's so great.
Yep. His mission is done. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only thing that can stop him is himself, like him deciding that, okay, this isn't worth it, I'm leaving. Like it's great. It really builds him up as this unstoppable Juggernaut, right? Like he really does live up to that name. Yeah, that's fun.
So then Spidey starts giving her mouth to mouth, and the cops arrive, put her in the ambulance. We're not sure what's going to happen to her now. So Spider-Man is, he kind of gathers up his thoughts, and he's like, well, I'm not going to let Juggernaut get away with this. I'm going to find a way to stop that unstoppable human tank, or die trying.
Right.
To be continued. So yes.
Yeah, this
was a really good issue.
Yeah, this was a great issue. I had a lot of fun with it. It's the art is great. It's nice to see John Romita Jr. back.
Absolutely,
with amazing, and again, Roger Stern is such a breath of fresh air with these Spidey comics. Yeah, it's really great. So I'm having a lot of fun with this, and I can't wait for next issue.
Exactly, he's on a roll. He's on a roll for sure.
Yeah, so definitely recommend that one.
Right, and so speaking of being on a roll, who's not on a roll is J.M. DeMatteis.
Right.
So once again, we have to trudge through this week's issue of Marvel Team Up, featuring Spider-Man and Professor X.
Right.
And once again, I'll leave the duties to summarizing this issue to you, Josh. Do your best.
You know how much I love summarizing Marvel Team Up.
Yes, I do.
You know what, though? I will say, this one I thought wasn't as bad.
No, I agree. It wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
You're right.
It was still, I think, a little bit dry and, like, not the most interesting comic, but it didn't feel like a Marvel Team Up.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I felt like Spider-Man did have some, at least at the beginning, he had like some reason for being there. So we catch up with Spider-Man and Wolverine after they went through that weird castle that kept popping up. They don't really resolve what happened there. We ended last issue with them at the building fighting a bunch of goons, right? And then I think that they were following somebody. I can't remember exactly, but this one starts up off with a fight, and I'm thinking, okay, so this is a continuation from last issue, and then there's a line saying, oh, we're in the danger room, and things kind of just turn off, and Professor X shows up. He starts introducing Spider-Man to the X-Men, and he's kind of there having lunch with them, and we're introduced to one of the newer members who's Sprite, and she's kind of a fan of Spider-Man, and there's some pretty cute moments there.
And the thing is, it's always cool because I've read every Chris Claremont X-Men several times.
Right.
So it's nice to see other creators tackle the X-Men from this time period, because this is like the classic X-Men time period, right?
Right.
So it's really cool. Anyway.
So after this, Professor X has to leave, and he's been like called to go on some sort of mission, or he needs help somewhere. His help is needed somewhere. So Spider-Man decides to tag him and jumps on the car and follows Professor X to his mission.
Right.
Professor X does realize, but doesn't really say anything about it. He kind of just lets Spider-Man come along for the ride. And we see that the person that has called Professor X is actually Professor Power from last issue.
Right.
And he wants Professor X to help him, I guess, revive his son, who has been who has some psychological damage and some like memory damage, and like he's kind of in this state of
he lies there unmoving, unthinking, a ravaged mind and a perfect body, thanks to the United States government.
Right.
So yeah, he's basically a vegetable. Yeah.
Right. So he's hoping that Professor X can somehow help him and like go into his mind and wake him back up. Professor X unfortunately gives him some bad news that it seems like his mind is split into two, and it's going to take some time to mend that, but it's up to his son to kind of like have it like pull his brain back together in the end and wake up, but it's going to take some time and some practice and patience. And Professor Power is not really interested in that. He wants action instead of he doesn't want to wait. He wants it to happen now. So he has a backup plan, and he has Mentallo.
Right.
I believe his name is, or we've run across him before, correct?
I don't know if we have we? Maybe.
Because he seems familiar.
Maybe, yeah. I think we might have talked about how to pronounce his name.
Yeah.
But I think it's Mentallo. Yeah.
So he's also a mutant or a superhero that has these telekinetic powers.
I think he's a villain, but it doesn't.
Really matter. Super villain.
Yeah.
So he kind of forces the two of them to go into his son's mind, and they're having this really cool like fight in each other's minds. And by the end of it, when they both come out, unfortunately his Professor Power's son was kind of trapped in between that fight, and Professor X doesn't think that he's going to be able to come back now.
Right.
Hence, yeah, so, Spider-Man's kind of fighting his goons and making his way over to Professor X while all this is happening. So the police finally show up, and Professor X kind of uses his telekinetic powers to make the police think that they're just playing a game of poker, or they're just sitting around a table talking. But in reality, Power is crying over his son's body, and Mentallo is lying on the floor, kind of unconscious. So
I think you meant his telepathic powers, right? Because telekinetic would be moving.
Oh, sorry, you're right.
Mind.
Telepathic.
Let's
yes.
be clear.
Yes,
Anyway.
sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So yeah, and you know what's funny is there's all this text and all this description.
Yeah.
And you summarize the story in like a minute and a half. And you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what to say.
There a lot happens on the panels, but not a lot in the story.
Yeah.
You know,
right.
Does that make sense? Like it feels like there's so much going on for such a little story that they're telling.
Right.
There is some fun stuff at the beginning, I think, like Wolverine and Spider-Man's banter is kind of fun when they're going through the danger room, and
this is my favorite stuff. Is all the beginning with the X-Men,
right?
Yeah,
and I will say I think some of the like something else I really liked. It was only a couple of panels really, but when they're having that fight in the mind, I love that they're kind of like on this like almost alien planet with I guess maybe not a planet, but like it's this. It doesn't really look like Earth. They're on this giant purple rock, and Professor X turns into this giant beast and knocks Metallo off, and Metallo turns into a giant like pterodactyl feathered bird and flies back up off the mountain, and they're kind of fighting each other. And I think that's so cool. Like if they're going to have this this fight in each other's minds where you can kind of become and imagine anything, I think that's so cool and so clever that they can just like put whatever they want in there.
Yes.
And like make each other like seem bigger or smaller or turn into a beast. Sure. Or I think I think I enjoyed this so much is because that's something. This is a weird kind of tangent, but this is kind of something I missed in the movie Inception.
Okay.
Because I thought that
there's no dream logic.
Right,
in that movie.
right. Everything just seems like everybody's just having a conversation. There's never really anything like weird going on.
Yeah, like that was a huge flaw. You're right.
Yeah, I think like the train shows up out of nowhere, and then when the bus is or the van is driving off of the bridge, they're floating, which makes Joseph Gordon-Levitt float in the hallway, which is kind of cool. But it seems very like logical, like this is happening, so this is happening. Where if they're playing with dreams, it would be so cool if they could kind of just go wild with it and make it seem like absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it would have been so much more fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're right.
So having this like almost like they're playing in each other's minds, so it's almost like a dream, like they can become whatever they want. So having Professor X turn into this big lion beast is so cool.
Right.
I mean even having Professor X like being able to walk around and jump, like he's not handicapped by his wheelchair and his disability in his mind and in his, how he, shows himself to other people in this kind of like dream world. It's really cool.
Right. I agree.
So yeah, there's definitely some fun stuff there.
Right. So better than last month.
Yeah.
But I don't really recommend it. Other than the scenes with the X-Men, I don't really recommend the issue.
Yeah. This was one of the stronger Marvel team-ups, but again, I don't think that's saying a whole lot.
No, it's not, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Again, like I don't think I've heard a single person ever refer to these issues. I don't think they've been reprinted as far as I know. Like clearly no one is itching to read these comics, right?
Right.
So that brings us to Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man, number 67.
Right. And this is another, I think, pretty good issue.
Oh, yeah. I love this cover. Mm-hmm. We've got a shot of Spidey, half Spider-Man, half Peter Parker, and then each of his spider legs are creating a different scene from the book. We see him fighting Boomerang. We see the Kingpin, Aunt May, a building blowing up, a couple those gangsters shooting at him. Right. And then, of course, Deborah Whitman crying because what would a Spider-Man comic be without that? And then Spider-Man dodging some boomerangs. Yeah.
I love that it says adventure, mystery, romance. Face it, friend.
Yes.
This issue has it all. It's so, it really kind of catches you and like, oh, I got to know what happens in this.
Right.
So, this was fun. This beginning was a really cool intro. Pretty, I love it. Like, dark and... it kind of takes this like ridiculous concept for a supervillain and gives him a little bit of depth and grit and kind of intimidating side to him. Because when you think Boomerang, like it's not very like scary.
No,
like it's a very goofy idea for concept, but yeah, I think they pulled his character off really well in this.
Yeah, I just love this opening page of this guy, soaking his feet, this cool shot, and then Boomerang's at the door, and he's looking through the peephole, and he's all distorted in the fisheye lens, Boomerang, the killer who keeps coming back. It's so cool. And then, of course, the building blows up, and there's are these cops outside? No, yes, they're government men who've been tipped off. So anyway, so this guy, we didn't mention this. So this guy is an informant for the FBI, right?
Yes.
So he's a bad guy, but he was busted, and so he's agreed to be an informant. And so Boomerang has been sent there to kill him, but the government agents are still watching him, so they're waiting right outside when this building or his apartment blows up. A great shot of them running up the stairs. Then Boomerang actually throws one of his boomerangs, and it cuts the guy's gun in half. It was a really cool shot, yeah. And then he cuts the stairway in half. Maybe a little ridiculous, but we'll forgive it, right? Yeah. And then this is the one thing, I kind of forgot about this, but Boomerang does indeed have rockets on his feet, which is kind of weird. Doesn't really fit with his power.
No, but it's fine.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
So he flies away. Then we cut over to Peter Parker. And again, this is all feeling very Steve Ditko-esque to me.
Yeah.
And so, his alarm is going off. He's waking up. Of course, it's Deborah Whitman on the phone, treats her like a piece of shit, hangs up. No, he's not that bad.
Right. Compared to later on, he's not too
compared
bad.
to later. No, he's not too bad. But then he also talks to, what's her name? Marcy Kane.
Right.
Who, we're not sure what's going on between those two.
Right. I mean, we actually start off with him realizing that it's later in the afternoon and he's missed his classes.
Right.
Right. And that's what Deb is calling him about. And then his, not his professor, his, I think one of his professors, the person who's...
Yeah, or is it the dean?
The dean, maybe, right.
Yeah.
So he's there also on the phone in the background with Deborah kind of... castrating?
Castrating. Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was castricizing. What is it?
No. I think I know which word you mean, but I'll have to Google it. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
He's upset with Parker as well.
Right.
Marcy calls, and then after that, the Bugle calls, and Joe Robertson is there, and he's kind of telling him that J. Jonah Jameson isn't in too great of a mood. And then finally, immediately again, starts ringing, and Peter Parker has had enough, and he starts yelling. He goes, "Go ahead, ruin my day more, rain on my parade, see if I care." And it's poor Aunt May. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think this is such a great way to show how Peter Parker is always down on his luck. Like, literally everything is thrown on him in the matter of like 30 seconds, and then it ends with him yelling at his Aunt May and then feeling so awful about it.
Yep.
So
yeah, of course.
Yeah, and then we see him having to fix his suit from last issue when Electro completely destroyed it. So he's got to make a new suit, and everything is just kind of building up all at once in this issue, and I think it's great.
Right, I agree. Yeah, it's just pure Peter Parker. So then the next page, he's swinging over the city, and then we see a shot of the Kingpin of Crime watching him. Right. And again, we have to remember that Kingpin was originally a Spider-Man villain, so yeah, he's still concerned with Spider-Man. He's still, Spider-Man is kind of a thorn in his side. Right. And so now he's confronting Boomerang. So Boomerang's standing there with all these goons having their guns pointed at him, and he's chastising him because he didn't. Is it because he didn't kill the guy?
No, it's because he got the guy killed.
Right,
he killed the guy, but and Kingpin filled him with misinformation to bring to the FBI.
Right, he didn't want him to be killed, and now he's mad because Boomerang went and did it without even asking Kingpin. That's
right,
why.
So Kingpin is kind of mad that Boomerang would do this without even consulting with him first. So he gives him a task saying, "You can join me if you take down Spider-Man. So come back to me when you take down Spider-Man, and then we'll talk." Right. So that's what sets Boomerang off, and he's after Spider-Man now. Right. And then we jump back to Peter, who is kind of dealing with everything from before, kind of coming back to him in real life. We see him run into Marcy Kane, and then the dean again, Dr. Sloan, he comes over and is saying that if he doesn't kind of clean up his act, he's not going to be able to be a professor anymore, or a student teacher. And everything is kind of all building up around him. And there's this great shot where he's walking into the halls of school, and he's kind of cast in shadow in these like ghostly images of all of his like family members and people in his life that are kind of weighing down on him, are kind of circling him and talking to him. It's really great.
Again, something Steve Ditko would definitely do is have like a sort of a vision of Spider-Man or a vision of supporting characters floating around. It's great,
right?
You know?
And I mean, even right after that, we do get an actual vision of Spider-Man, and
right.
It's kind of getting all in Peter's head, and he punches Spider-Man, which completely bends and breaks his locker.
Right, and this is where Deborah Whitman comes back in, and of course, you know, Deborah, Peter, I heard a horrible crash. You all right? Deborah, I can't let her see what my spider strength did to this locker. It was nothing, Deb. I just couldn't get my locker open. And did you hurt your hand? Deb, the last thing I need right now is someone hovering over me like a den mother. But I didn't mean. I'm sorry, Peter. I only wanted to help. And then she runs away crying, of course.
Right. And he says something like, I didn't want to upset her, but that was the only way to get rid of her. Blast. It's like,
blast. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Peter. But then, so this
Deborah.
like half-page panel afterwards is great, I think. We have Peter in the center, and he's casting this like red and orange light and shadow, and we have all of these images around him and these faces around him while he's in school, and there's a bunch of different like dialogue boxes like, Mr. Parker, you're wonderfully unprepared in biophysics, and like everybody's starting with Mr. Parker, and it kind of just builds up around him, and there's a bunch of bubbles by the end that are saying Mr. Parker, and I can almost see this, like I can see everything kind of spinning around, and like the constant like Mr. Parker, Mr. Parker, Mr. Parker, you know what I mean? Like I can almost like hear it in different voices. I think this panel really demonstrated and was able to kind of get that across without having too much and too many panels and too many word bubbles either. Right,
I agree. Yeah, it's great. And then the next page, we cut to a shot of him swinging over the city, and we see Boomerang standing behind a sign. It is so awesome.
It's so good.
Yeah, I love this.
Yeah, it's a full splash page. But it also is kind of divided up into two panels almost. Like not two panels, but two scenes.
Yeah,
like
it's like two images. Yeah, because the top one, it's two different scenes, but it's not divided by a panel. It's really cool.
Right. It's almost like the first half of it is from Boomerang's point of view, and then the second is from Spider-Man's point of view, and it flips around the Daily Bugle sign.
It's really cool.
And yeah, it's really great.
Okay, so then... Sorry, what were we going to say?
You know what? I just realized, though, the Daily Bugle is backwards when Boomerang is behind it, right? Because he's behind the sign, right?
Okay, yeah.
B-U-E-G. But then when it cuts to him walking in front of it, it's backwards again. Wouldn't it be front way? I didn't even notice that.
Good. Wait.
Or is that the back?
Oh. Unless he's swung around.
He swung around. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so Boomerang is just turned around. Okay, that makes sense.
Wait a minute. Is that right?
You know, that is right, because you can actually see the bars holding up the sign. Yeah, okay.
There you go.
Yeah. But
smart guy, that Ed Hannigan.
Yeah, really great splash page. I love this.
Yeah, I agree. So then they're at it again. It's fisticuffs. They start fighting. It's again some really cool shots. It's like some nice gritty realism. Like the woman with carrying the shopping bags at the bottom of the panel, right?
Right.
And then running off. Like it just feels like a real city. Like those little details add to it, right? Mm-hmm. It's Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man is always a little bit grittier, always a little bit darker.
Right.
I find.
I think even like the panel layout of all this is really great too, because on that page you can see her walking right below Spider-Man as he's swinging.
Yep.
The next page, she's screaming and drops the bags. And then the panel after that, you see her actually running away and the bag is on the ground.
Right.
It's so great. Yeah, it's a great way to kind of like keep the layout the same by telling a story in the background and showing you where other characters are, so you can kind of see how Spider-Man is swinging around. It's really good.
And you know what else? There's not a lot of detail on these buildings, but the important thing is, like you said, it's telling the story. There's only enough details to get that information across. It doesn't matter if you draw every brick in the building. What matters is you see where he's swinging, you see the woman reacting, right? And you're flipping around perspective. It's really cool.
And I think that if there was too much detail on the building, we wouldn't be looking at Spider-Man.
Exactly.
Right? Like the boomerangs act as arrows as well. Like they're literally pointing to Spider-Man. His spider sense is going off, which all these lines coming off his head are pointing at him. Like everything, like even the line of action of the boomerangs are swinging around and pointing at him. Like
good point.
Everything in that first panel is like your attention is supposed to be on Spider-Man as his spider senses are going off and he's swinging through the city. And I think if you have too much going on with the buildings and too much detail in the background, like if they drew like a bunch of cars and like lines in the road, like I think it would just distract and be too much behind that it would take away from the fact that the focus is Spider-Man.
I agree.
So yeah, I agree with you when you say that I think the simplicity of the buildings really works.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. And that's the thing, is that I think a modern reader might look at this art and they might look at one individual panel and say, well, it doesn't really look that special, right? There's not much to it. But it's just the overall, the storytelling is so good and there's so much thought put into every panel, I think,
I think that you may be right. Like I think it's a really well made panel, but it's not like amazing art that's blowing my mind. It's the fact that the storytelling is so great in this panel. Like I think that's what makes it stand out to me is
exactly
not the art and not like the incredible attention to detail. It's the fact that everything works so well that your eye is led through the panel and you know exactly what you're looking at and what's going on. And I think paired with the other panels, they really lend themselves to each other and lend themselves to that storytelling.
Like a puzzle, right?
Yeah,
they all
for
fit
sure.
Together.
For sure.
Yeah, so there's some great shots of them fighting on top of the roof. I love, again, I got like this like gas pellet or whatever this is. It's just, again, something Steve Ditko would probably do.
Right.
Yeah, it's so cool. They're fighting on top of the building. Spider-Man falls, and then he's got his web, but then what's his name? His boomerang cuts the web, but as far as I know, his web's supposed to be unbreakable. So who knows? Maybe he's got extra strong boomerangs. I don't know.
Right.
But and then this is kind of funny because then J. Jonah Jameson sees what's going on and he wants a photographer to go out and start shooting it. But then he's like, cancel that last order, Miss Grant. They're no longer battling outside. So now Spider-Man and Boomerang are inside the Daily Bugle fighting. So it's kind of cool. And then we see this great shot of Lance Bannon with his camera, kind of like hovering over Spider-Man as Spider-Man's sort of falling or flying by, right? And he's getting like a cool shot of him there. It's really nice.
Yeah. And then it cuts to the outside of the Bugle, and we see Boomerang being thrown out of the window.
Right.
And then right afterwards, it's almost the same panel, and his camera comes flying out, and the roll of film is like being flung out at the back. I think it's really funny.
I'm risking my life while he makes money taking pictures. And then, it's like, sorry, accidents will happen, because Lance Bannon is Peter Parker's rival.
Right.
So
and I think he even says afterwards something about I'll buy Bannon a new camera later. But now, Boomerang, it's just you and me again. So you definitely know that it was Peter kind of like getting back at him and making sure that he's the main photographer of the Bugle.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
So it's cool. So anyway, they keep fighting, and then the some of Kingpin's thugs come back, and then Peter, and then basically they've got him cornered. They've got their guns pointed at him.
Cornered Boomerang in the alley.
Sorry,
right?
Yeah, cornered Boomerang, and then Spider-Man actually throws Boomerang his boomerangs. It's kind of confusing, to say that, but yeah. So then Boomerang uses his boomerangs to disarm these thugs. And then he assumes that Spider-Man is helping him. So he's like, I don't get it. why'd Spider-Man toss me my boomerang if he meant to turn me in? He could have let Kingpin's goons kill me. And then the cops say, maybe he wanted the law to punish you, killer. And then Peter thinks, that's one reason, but I also wanted to take this picture for the front page of tomorrow's Daily Bugle.
Right.
Lance Bennon, eat your heart out. So that's pretty much it.
Right.
And then we get a nice shot of the Kingpin, watching from his office, right?
Right.
So nice little wrap up there. It's great.
Yeah, I think it's a really great ending, and like it is a little bit abrupt. Like he defeats the bad guy, and then we kind of get a couple of panels where everything finishes up. But I really love Spider-Man swinging back through the city, and then we kind of parallel earlier on with Kingpin looking out and seeing Spider-Man swing. I think it's a really great way to end it.
Yeah, me too.
I also think that Boomerang is a really good villain for this story, because Boomerangs always come back, and it kind of seems like a big focus of this issue was Peter Parker's problems, and even when he tries to fix it, it always ends up, it's fixced for a while and everything seems fine, but then it always kind of comes back to him, and everything kind of is broken again. So I think it's a really fun parallel to the story that they're trying to tell with Peter as well. So
right. Yeah, it's very cool. So overall, another good issue of Spectacular Spider-Man. I would definitely recommend this.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Actually,
I think it's actually I think it's hard for me to decide which one I like better, with Amazing or Peter Spectacular this week.
You're right.
They're both really good.
The only difference is really the tone. Like the art of John Romita Jr. and Jim Mooney makes Amazing kind of lighter,
right?
I think, right, and brighter and more fun. And this Spectacular art by Ed Hannigan and Al Milgrom is a little bit darker,
right? I mean, even the story I feel like is a little bit darker in this one. Like Juggernaut, we have him kind of destroying a bunch of stuff, and he's unstoppable. He's rampaging through the city while Peter Parker's kind of sent on this mad goose chase, getting calls everywhere he stops from Madam Web. And then with this one, it's a little bit more darker. We have Boomerang getting mixed in with like Kingpin's Mafia, and the police getting involved, and Peter Parker has some, like a lot of issues with this one. There's like a couple of murders that happen. Like it's a little bit more serious, I think.
Yeah.
So definitely different tones, and I think that they're good for their own reasons.
Right.
But
and I think that the Amazing issues are more like the John Romita Sr. era of Amazing Spider-Man in the 60s.
Right.
And the Spectacular is more like the Steve Ditko era.
Yeah,
That's
agree.
how I see it. Yeah. So there you go. So another good month of Spider-Man. Once again, 2 out of 3, right?
Yeah.
The Marvel Team Up was a little bit better, but still not great. So we're not going to recommend that one. But yeah, definitely a good era of Spider-Man. If you want to get in, if you love Spider-Man, but you find the 60s stuff a little bit too dated, then I would definitely recommend the era that we are covering in this podcast.
For sure.
The Spider-Cast. Yeah. So you can take it from here, Josh.
Yeah. You guys can catch us over at the Comic Book Syndicate on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher.
Yeah, Stitcher,
Okay.
Twitter, YouTube, Facebook.
Right. If you want to find us on Twitter, our Twitter is @Comic Syndicate.
That's right.
So,
the rest are all comic book syndicate.
Yes. We'd love to hear back from you guys, and we want to know what you guys think about the episodes and the issues that we're reading, so we definitely want to keep that conversation going, so hit us up there.
That's right. So a new episode of Here Comes the Spider-Cast drops every Monday from Comic Book Syndicate. So until next Monday, this has been Here Comes the Spider-Cast.